Hi, this is Var from Scrapimania, and today I am going to paint this in. I'm following along with Ginger Cook. She's teaching John how to create a cup with a little tea bag, and I'm going to do the same. My cup is actually using watercolor. She's using acrylic, and the reason why I like watercolors over acrylic is that I don't have to wash my brush immediately, and it's less messy. The only problem is watercolors are transparent, so sometimes you cannot hide things. So what I want to use is these watercolor crayons. I feel like watercolor crayons gives me a little bit of that opaqueness of acrylic without the mess. And if you saw my other video on this one, even though I used bleeding tissue to create this outline, this background, and then I put my doll on top, when I used my portfolios, notice that it really was opaque enough that the background does show a little bit, but not as much. And I was able to give her some skin tones and color her hair. So it does look pretty nice. I do like the watercolor crayons. And to me, they're a mix between actual acrylics and watercolor, because watercolors are very translucent, so you cannot really hide this background. But with the crayons, you can kind of hide a little more. So I'm going to see how this comes out. I really enjoy watching Ginger cook, and I definitely enjoy her episodes. She calls them RAS, is Reality Art Studio, and you can follow along when she has these episodes. She's now in episode 7, and I'm really enjoying these live episodes that she has. So I'm also going to be using this Jane Davenport inkable pen. It is not water resistant. It does bleed, and I think that really going to give a nice realistic to this paint. It's going to really look really nice. So I already drew out following Ginger's advice. So I'm going to put the link to her video so you can follow along. So hopefully you like this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and start outlining my cup. So I'm going to go ahead and narrate a little more this part. So what I'm doing is I'm going over my pencil lines with my Jane Davenport pen, and I really liking this fountain pen. It works pretty nicely. And then after it's dry, I'm going to erase the pencil lines, and now I'm ready to go over this with my watercolor crayons. And what I'm going to do is wet to wet. So I wet the surface a little bit, and then I'm going to go over it and blend the colors. And see how it really is a little more opaque, my watercolor crayons, than if I would have used watercolors. I really like the crayons. And these are not very expensive. They're more economical than the ones out there like the Caran d'Ache, or even any other watercolor crayons that, you know, the artist quality ones. And they work pretty well, even though they're not artist quality. For art journal and for plain, they're pretty good. And here I'm just creating the shadow, following along with Ginger Cook, and making sure I dry the layer. So now I'm going to dry it, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a little more details. And one thing I like doing is using a hair dryer instead of my heat gun, the embossing gun, because the hair dryer is lower temperature, so I really enjoy using that. My paint doesn't buckle as much. So I just want to give some highlights. Now Ginger does use acrylic paint, white paint, to create the highlights, but I'm just using some white opaque paint, and I believe this is, I'm not sure what kind of paint this is. I think it's a mixture of acrylic paint with water that I put in a pen. So I'm done with my page. I really like how this came out. Love this little area here with the bleeding tissue. It was a nice backdrop for my cup. Love how the cup came out. I don't like the paper too much. If you put too much water, the paper does start peeling, and that's the problem with this Canson watercolor XL paper. It's the same as the mixed media paper. I think they're about the same kind of quality. They're perfect for quick sketches, but if you want to create an artwork with a lot of water, you know, saturated with water, it doesn't work too well because it starts peeling. Sometimes when I do create my mixed media dolls that I go over with multiple layers, I tend to see that the paper starts peeling off on here, so you have to be very careful. Let me see one that I can find. I mean, I know how this paper works, so that's why I've been able to stay away from it peeling too much as I compose my layers. But sometimes you'll see in this journal that if I go over it too much, it starts peeling off, like it here, the paper started peeling off. But it's still a good paper to use to play around with. You can find it very economical, especially if you get the 60 or 50% off coupon at Michael's. You'll get these for under $5. So that's why I like using these. So I hope you like this video, and thank you for watching. Bye now.